everyone, welcome to Know Your Rights. I'm Ambika Hirnandani. I'll be bringing you this series in collaboration with my friends at Shebang for Good. At Know Your Rights, we'll be explaining to you what your legal rights are in some of the more challenging situations that life throws at us. The criminal justice system is extremely difficult to navigate. Filing an FIR can be a daunting process. It's even more scary if an FIR is filed against an individual. So today we'll be having legal expert Mr. Siddharth Agarwal joining us to explain to us what our rights are in this situation and how we can navigate this fairly complicated process. Hi sir, thank you so much for taking the time and being with us today. Could you explain to us what is the difference between, say, an FIR and a non-cognizable complaint?
So, Ambika, I think the way to understand it is that the law manages to divide our offences either into cognizable or non-cognizable. Cognizable are those which a police officer can investigate without any specific directions from a magistrate. There may be issues of being able to arrest without a warrant, etc. Non-cognizable are relatively minor offences which require a person to go to court directly or to get a order from a magistrate to actually have an investigation begin. So the more serious offences which require the police to investigate as a matter of course are those which are covered under the FIR sections, that's cognizable cases, and those which are relatively minor or are private disputes are really non-cognizable in that sense.
So what if, like, my house gets burgled and I need to file an FIR? How do I go about doing this?
Yeah, so in anything that happens which requires you to interface with the law enforcement machinery, the idea is that one must go to the police station either physically, or now there are various ways of doing an EFIR, for example, of communicating what the problem is. Giving it doesn't need to be very detailed, but it has to be reasonably clear about what has happened. And when you tell that to a police officer, they should be in a position to discern if there is a cognizable offense made out or not. If, for example, in the example that you gave, there's a burglary, there's a robbery, there's a dacoity, all of those things will fall under cognizable cases. The police will register an FIR. If they are, as I said, minor offences of some infraction over neighborly fight, or if somebody's car hits another car kind of story, which is without really any great amount of intention, they may actually file an NC report, which is the non-cognizable. And in either situation, you are entitled as a complainant to get a copy of what you have filed.
Now, sir, at this point of time, once I've gone to the police, once say something has happened to me, I've gone to the police station, I've filed a complaint. Now, whether it's an NC or an FIR, do I need to call a lawyer at any point of time?
I think that, Ambika, we must understand that there are some things which happen which don't leave us time to get to a lawyer. So, if there's an emergency, and if there's a theft, for example, if there's an issue of somebody has beat somebody up, and immediately we would advise, listen, call 100 number, make a call on 100 number so that the police is informed. In those situations, obviously, going to a lawyer first and then reporting to the police becomes difficult. But if it is something where, for example, it's more in the nature of a cheating that has happened to me, or a breach of trust that has happened to me, which sort of typically happens over a period of time. For those cases, for example, it's best that one does go to a lawyer first before we, go to the police. It would be better if somebody who's trained, who's skilled, who's able to advise on what the relevant facts are and what is not so relevant, is able to look at that complaint before it's actually filed with the police.
So we've decided it depends on the type of complaint whether we call a lawyer or we don't call a lawyer. In both situations, so once the complaint is filed, it goes to court. And then how long does it take, and what is this process like?
So, investigations should not take too much time. time. Unfortunately, like many other things in our society, in our country, there is too much pressure on the police agencies as well. So they're not able to be as efficient as they should. So if it's a relatively minor offense which does not require a great amount of investigation, things should move in, say, about a month or 2 months from the stage of lodging an FIR to actually putting a charge sheet in court. But for other offenses which are involved, for example, if you need a forensic analysis, and our forensic laboratories are extremely overworked, and there's a lot of waiting which happens. So because of all these things, there is sometimes a delay. Again, there are very intricate and complex cases which obviously take much more time to investigate. Once the matter goes to court, again, depending on the severity, depending on the complexity, you should be able to get a resolution quickly. Unfortunately, again, with the same thing as investigating agencies, the pressure on our courts, the pressure on our criminal justice system is really too much. Various judges have in the past also raised concerns about it. And while they're taking some steps to try and expedite things, it is difficult. So it's a laborious process, and it's not something which really comes with good tidings in terms of having a very quick or very speedy, efficient resolution. That's the unfortunate bit today.
So that brings me to my next question, which is typically, and I understand this is slightly unfair to ask a lawyer, but typically, in your opinion, how long does a criminal case take? Like, say, for example, my house gets burgled, I file a case, and then we go to court. How long will I be done with the whole thing, sir?
Ambika, it should take about a year to 2 years, from start to finish, if one was to give everybody a fair chance and a equitable chance in this process, because one must be clear that hasty decisions or decisions which are made quickly aren't necessarily fair to either side. They may be fair to one side, but they're definitely not fair to the entire all the stakeholders in the system. But if it's supposed to be, or if it is going to be in that 1 to 2 year bracket, I think it would be efficient, it would be fine. I don't think we are able to reach that for many of our cases.
So, sir, now that's the situation if one needs to file an FIR. But what if, say, for example, I get a call and I find out that a case has been filed against me? What do I do at that point of time? Because I mean, even though I'm a lawyer, if somebody called me up and told me a case had been filed against me, I would be totally confused and I wouldn't know what to do at that point of time. So could you advise just the average person what they should do?
No, absolutely. And I think it's sometimes we don't sort of predict, or we don't foresee something legal going wrong with us, and us needing the services of a lawyer, us coming into some sort of a conflict with the law. But it is important to know that the moment there is any indication that there is a criminal case against you, that your first call has to be to a lawyer. Because that person, again, as I said, who's skilled in this, can understand what is the severity of this, so whether it's a non-cognizable case, whether it's an FIR, whether the investigation is of a nature which exposes you to arrest, is loss of liberty, is loss of property, could there be a search and seizure operation at your premises, what kind of action can you expect? Because the first job of a lawyer within this process is to educate the client on what to foresee, what is the foreseeable actions within the law that the investigating agencies can and do take. So I think that the short answer to your question is, the moment there is a criminal case against anybody, they should reach out to somebody who is accessible, competent, obviously, and definitely first call to a lawyer.
First call to a lawyer. And then, say, sir, for example, if the person does end up getting arrested in this situation and they do end up being taken to like an under trial facility, how long does it take to get bail? What is the procedure there? And for what should people know just to be aware of these situations?
Yeah, so one would assume that, at least if not at the time of arrest, so when you're arrested, within 24 hours you have a right to be produced before a magistrate. And that's the first, the interplay of the judicial oversight with the investigative process takes place right there. So within 24 hours, I must be produced before a magistrate. Magistrate is required to furnish a lawyer to me if I do not have a lawyer at that time. A legal aid lawyer can be provided to me, and amicus can be appointed by the court. But it is important for me to understand, as an accused, as somebody who's been arrested, as to what are the grounds of my arrest, why am I being taken into custody. So we have two kinds of custody. For example, we have police custody, which is you can be sent into police custody for investigative purposes, or there is judicial custody where you may not be required necessarily for investigation yourself, but you are being incarcerated so that the investigation can go on without interference from your end. So with all the more reason why the investigations should proceed quickly. The law provides that judges have the discretion, even in non-bailable cases, to release people on bail. There are now, well accepted guidelines that have been laid down on when that should happen. But again, for offences which are non-bailable, either 60 days or 90 days is the maximum that, and I said 60 or 90 because it depends on which offence one is involved in. That's the maximum that somebody can be put in jail without there being a formal charge sheet, which is filed by the investigating agency before court. So if I am arrested, investigation should conclude within a certain specific time frame, and that's a very important safeguard, to ensure that people don't languish in custody unnecessarily and for a long time. But as to how much time will it take in any particular case, Ambika, it depends both on the individual circumstances of the matter, as well as obviously the access to justice and ability to navigate sometimes our cumbersome process more effectively. So I think these are things which will always differentiate one case from another.
So could you explain exactly what like a bail proceeding is like, and what somebody needs to be prepared for should they get arrested? Like, what happens in a bail proceeding? Do we need to file some sort of a bond? What do people's loved ones need to be ready with?
Yeah, so if somebody is arrested, as I said, there are two possible circumstances. One is if it is a bailable offence, and the other it's a non-bailable offence. If it's a bailable offence, then bail is a matter of right, and the police officer must release you on bail right there and then. If it is a non-bailable offence, then typically the police officer will produce you before a magistrate within that first 24-hour time frame. From then on, you can move an application for bail. The objective of that bail application is to convince the court that you have a good case on merits. While that's it's a secondary issue in certain kind of cases, the important things are that you are going to be available to the investigating agency as and when they required. Investigation is not going to suffer because of you. You are not going to hamper investigation, tamper with witnesses, withhold documents, etc. So the fact that the most important reason for bail is that the court must be satisfied that as and when the case is brought against you, you will be available to go through that trial, you will be available to take punishment if you are found guilty. So in that sense, it's not it's not punitive. You're not being sent to jail because you did something wrong, but you are being sent to jail so that in the event that you're found out that you've done something wrong, you will be available to take that punishment. So in very severe cases, in extreme cases, bail is sometimes denied through the trial. But typically, in most cases, people who are arrested will find an ability to convince a court that they are worthy of being released on bail.
So, what type of cases is bail denied? And this is just out of curiosity. I just wanted to.
Yeah, so I'm saying, so for example, you have at one end of the spectrum, I say terrorist offenses or murder cases, sometimes rape cases, cases where somebody is a repeat offender, sort of doing robberies and dacoities or those kind of activities on a more active scale. There is a large scale arms issues. So depending on the nature of this offense, the nature of involvement of that person, and definitely the history of that individual. If it's a first time offense, courts will be more lenient towards that position. But if it is somebody who has multiple cases against them, then the courts will tend to deny you bail, because obviously, your having indulged in past criminal activity is a relevant feature for assessing that purpose.
So, sir, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time you've taken, and now we kind of understand what it's like to file an FIR, what to immediately do, say, should an FIR be filed against someone. Thank you for explaining it in such a simple and succinct way. I'm very grateful to you for taking the time.
Thanks, Ambika. Thanks a lot.